Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel where we review anything and everything. And today we're getting to taking a look at the updated look at my Capital City Planet Slums mock simple build. And I always emphasize that because it is just a simple build with simple parts. But in the updated review of it, essentially what I do is I add some of my own personal parts that you guys may not necessarily have available to. So when I first do the build review, I do it with just the simple parts, which are the kind of parts that you see here, regular bricks, regular plates, nothing special. And then in this video, I add just a few of the parts that I have extra just to jazz it up a little bit. And what's funny is that at first I wasn't sure how this was gonna come out. And I was a little bit stumped for how I was gonna put things together. But as I kind of got into it, grabbed a few of my little parts from other little, bags and sets that I had laying around from extra parts, nothing fancy, nothing like that. It really came together pretty well, especially in certain parts. Certain parts are still basic, but nonetheless, so glad I was able to get to that. And we're gonna jump into it. And we're essentially gonna break the whole thing apart as I did previously in the video, because all this is pretty much modular in terms of being able to take the apartments off and whatnot and the stores off. So, and a couple things that I made some actually not major changes, but interior changes from these two buildings here, these stores. So let's get into it. So the first thing we are going to start with is these apartments over here. And what I'm gonna do is take these off because I use these to kind of just hold it and lock them together, because when you have taller structures, what tends to happen is as they get taller up, they're not as close connected as they are on the bottom. They tend to sometimes spread, so that keeps them from falling apart from each other. So what I'm going to do is this here, and I'm going to just pull just one of these off. I'm not going to show all of these or the neighboring one next to it, because they're essentially the exact same setup in terms of what I did for the interior. But you can see here, just simply did a bed setting. Now I used the tan one because I feel like in Star Wars that tends to be like how they use the coloring for the beds. Granted, you can't always do that with your bricks. But what I did here is I also planted it a little low to the floor, because the table here, I didn't want to be too high, but I didn't want the bed to be at the same height as the table. So here I made the bed a little lower, and then the table there. I don't have any accessories on the table at the moment, but obviously if I ever got to the point of decorating this with figures, which I really don't have figures like that other than like city type figures. I don't have anything that will resemble like Star Wars type of figures. Then that would be the case. But this is a basic setup right here. So I mimicked this in all 6 of the apartments over here. So it's just a bed with a table by the window. And that is pretty much it. Simple build. Like I said, these are the slum areas of my Capital City Planet based off Coruscant. So it is pretty basic. The living here is pretty basic. It's supposed to have that kind of, dreary, cyberpunk-ish type of vibe, which I already had mentioned that in the previous videos of the build and of the review of this, the basic review of this. So that is that. All right, and what I did is I just locked it back up on the top there. Now we're gonna come around to these right here, these other buildings. These are the other stacks, I call them. People say living in the stacks. I had mentioned before, I got that term from Ready Player One, that movie. I was watching it again not too long ago, and I just kind of had that in my mind. I was like, it had this kind of similar vibe. So I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna call this, that. So we're gonna pop this off. Now everything below here is the same design as well. Now here I went with a smaller bed size. Now granted, that doesn't really fit a minifigure completely. The legs are gonna hang off just by a little bit, but these are a lot smaller apartments. So I pretty much just downsized the entire thing. And I think it's suiting for, like I said, this is the underground. This is where, there's a lot of poverty, whatnot in the lore. So they have smaller beds. Now the other one, I wanted to put 2 beds in there, but just for display, I didn't feel like I needed to do that right now. And I ran out of these, at least in the tan color. But like I said, if I really had a need to build it up and utilize it like that, then I would, but it was just for show. But these ones would definitely only have a single bed inside them, or, at at least if I was to do a double bed, I could do the 4 next to each other, but I'm able to off center it because I take a beam and then I put that underneath it. Let me just show you guys. And all the other ones that you saw on the other one was done the same way. You can see how that is. So that allows it to centerize on the 3 holes right there. And that allows for a minifigure, if they lay on it, their arms are not going to be hitting the wall. So that's why I do that. So even the ones you saw that were 6 studs wide in the bigger apartments are done the same way. But in this case, if I was to make it a double bed, I would just then take it on both sides, over there and over here. And then, you know, maybe you could fit 2 people in there. You just wouldn't be able to lay them and press them on the studs. You would just throw them in there. But that's a little working table as far as just, you know, your counter space and whatever the case is. So very basic. But like I said, it's really about the idea that this is very much very low key. And what's interesting is I watched a video before doing the build where I seen someone was just talking about like Coruscant in general and showing certain things. And they showed some pictures of apartments, and apartments were very small. Some of them, they look like studio apartments that almost had like a loft design in them. I thought that was very interesting. I mentioned this in the previous video, in the build video of this, I believe, but it was just very interesting where you had, imagine a studio apartment, one small section of it has like slightly elevated, there's a bathroom and whatnot in there, but the height or the ceiling of that doesn't reach the ceiling of the actual apartment. So on top of the ceiling of the bathroom is like your kind of little loft area for a bed. Not really large, but think of like tiny houses. And it was kind of like that vibe. So that was like, okay. So even though this is not designed in that way, that was became my mindset in terms of just a cramped apartment building. So I thought that was really cool. Now coming over to here is where it's gonna get a lot more work was done for the stores in terms of just filling them up with some stuff and whatnot. First, what I'm going to do is just take a look at this right here. I'm going to move my little dash render figure from here. And what I want to first do is come to ground level, and then we're going to break down some of these things. So coming down here to ground level, one thing I wanted to show, I thought was really cool, is I wanted to have like how a lot of times in these kind of cyberpunk type of scenarios, you have these, sorry, I just wanted to focus. I think the lighting is just a little bad down here. That's why. Let me just move my lights over a little bit. Like neon signs and stuff like that. So it was like kind of the best I was able to kind of come up with on the fly, but I thought it was kind of cool. It's hard getting them to kind of face outwards, but then I realized that technique. And then so I did the same here, and we're going to get into what this is here in a moment. And here's just kind of our wide view of this right here. Like I said, I know the lighting is a little tough, but you get it. And it's funny because that same darkness in there that you see is how it would feel in there. Obviously I threw that little light there, but it would feel that kind of vibe of like, you know, very dark, the neon lights. And so that's the idea of it. So let's first get into this little building over here, which in the previous breakdown and review of it, I mentioned that this building might be like, this little structure was going to probably be a little like food stand, whatever the case is. I did see something in one of those same videos that I mentioned that was breaking down Coruscant, and it said about that there was like this person, I don't know if they served like noodles or something like that, but this little stand that a lot of people came for cheap noodles. I think it was like $1 for noodles, you know, a one credit for noodles, something like that. So I was digging through some of my parts and I saw this like cup in this bowl, and I was like, that'd be kind of cool. So this right here with this neon sign is just that. It's a, oops. Trying to straighten out this as best as possible, and I knock things over. But this is like a little food stand there that serves like, we'll just say things like tea and noodles, you know, just cheap stuff that feel good, and people come by, they get it. It also kind of reminds me of Blade Runner had, like, if not mistaken, a noodle shop or a noodle stand in that movie that Harrison Ford's character was eating at. So yes, so this is supposed to be that type of vibe. And, you know, like I said, just simple shop. It's not a big build. This is important in terms of the location because this is my visual front. So it couldn't be a big building. So I had to kind of make that makes sense. And I think by decorating it in that way brings it really to life, where you would have like a lot of people, just imagine streets piled with a lot of people walking by. They're just walking through, and you know, they come for the noodle shop, and some people are like, hey, you know, this noodle shop on the you know, whatever floor level, because when you start learning about how Coruscant's broken down, it's like a levels, similar to like a building. There are levels to the cities, or almost like the I don't know what you want to call it, like areas. But anyway, someone just been like, hey, let's go down to this level, and they got a really nice noodle and tea shop, you know, so that was kind of like cool to me. Now we're gonna jump into this here. I'm gonna break this one off. That is also a little set of stores. There is only 2 below there, and the top one is really just a walk path, as I mentioned before. So let's lift this up here, our little connecting bridge, and then we're gonna lift this one up here, which I made these to be able to come apart relatively easy, so it doesn't have to cause too much commotion. And that is the point of it, because obviously to reach things in the interior, you got to do that. So I'm going to just pull this back, pull it right out of its spot. Now, getting into this right here, this top one is just the walk path. So the only thing I did is I put like a little table there. You know, like just like this is more so like a passerby vendor. So imagine, because the idea I feel when it comes to this type of underground capital city type of area, cyberpunkish type of feel, is that the streets are not just the ground level. The streets are also up above, which is why, sorry about that, which is why I have these paths kind of almost indicating this vibe, like you're walking around just as much at the top as you are at the bottom, because you aren't going to come all the way down just to walk across the street and then whatever. That's not how those type of cyberpunk capital city vibes look like, especially in the slums area. If you look at pictures of Coruscant, they have a lot of those connecting bridges. So for that reason, this is just really a pathway, but this is almost like where you'd have a little street vendor on that pathway, just sitting there on the side. Someone's passing by, you know, he's always bothering people, hey, buy this, buy that, whatever the case is. So that's what that floor represents in this commercial tower. Now, and these always come off, but it's not a big deal. Now on this one here, let me just take it off and make it easier to show, and then we're going to show the bottom one anyway in a second. So, and though this is not a big deal, sometimes I like to just put them back on anyway, even though normally I just layer it back down. So on this one here, I didn't put too much. I just put some basic stuff in it, because just to give the representation that, you know, whatever. But I did decorate the way the desk and the counter was, and I really actually like that. It's pretty good. He's got that that one on the side facing the window, and that's like a little black kind of item, whatever it is, the little box thing, and little like fragments of different things that he'd be selling. So this I didn't try to go too hard with, but it was just to kind of just give it that kind of you know, curved countertop, and where a person could come in. There we go. Where a person could come and just, like I said, you know, whatever little things they're trying to get there inside the underworld. Now, this one right here, I really enjoy. This guy who comes in the shop, he doesn't have an entrance. He jumps over the counter. So it would be one of those things where you pull the the frame door, the mesh gate, down, or whatever the case is, one of those steel gates down when the shop is not open. There goes some neon signs just there, either pertaining to the shop or just pertaining to something going on there. Maybe it says like shopping area, you know, just to indicate that. Now what I put here, I had a theme kind of going on. I took that one from the upper part of the capital city, because I was like, I kind of want to bring that down here as a more like mysterious, how did someone get a hold of that? Probably like a rancor tooth or claw or something like that. Now the black one and the smaller white one are actually from a Venom mech set. So what's interesting is within the Star Wars universe, this is going to be a very rare example of a alien black symbiote. Everyone's probably like, what is that? Like, as far as in the Star Wars universe. So I thought that was kind of a cool, funny theme, along with that tooth piece. And then obviously this one I just had extra, so I was like, let me just throw that in the mix just to be a part of that same thing. So these are all like various parts of like, you know, creature body parts or something like that would be, like sell high on the market, the black market. So you'd have to come down to the shady areas of the capital city to kind of really find these kind of things, because they normally wouldn't be sold like that. So that is that. We're gonna top this off now and then close this all up. And as I mentioned before, these were placed there before just to connect it to the elevator without it physically connecting to the elevator, because I don't want, you can see right there in the background of the elevator, because I don't want it to be where when I gotta take it apart like I just did, it gives me a hassle and problem when it comes to connecting. So that's why I do that like that. And then also here, I'm just gonna put this part back just for the purpose of we're not gonna be coming back over to this space again, so might as well just have it with that look. And now we're going to jump to the stores. I'm not going to put this piece back on yet because it'll just be easier for me when accessing these stores. Now obviously you see the steps that come upwards. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so you could see here the steps and a little side door there. Now, even though it's not a lot of room for the side door, a person can enter it. Obviously, one thing I didn't like is that they have to come off of the scene to do it. But nonetheless, it is what it is, and they would go. But this is just for the person who works there, really going into the shop there. I decided to make it more of the type where a person will shop from the front of it rather than going on the inside. So the inside is just the entrance space for him. And even though he could just jump over the edge, over the front counter, not everyone's gonna do that. So his is not like that. But what we're gonna do now is pull this whole thing off. We're gonna pull the top one off, and then we're gonna do the bottom one. So what's interesting is this, if you guys remember at all, matter of fact, no, I'm sorry. It's gonna be the top one that we're gonna look at when I say that. But this piece right here, I had the shelf here, not that part, just this part of the shelf. And then later I took that and added it to the top one. The top one didn't have a shelf, if you guys remember, when we get to it. So here I decided to turn this one into like almost like a tasty pastry shop. That is space ice cream. And just whatever. Yes, you might think this wouldn't be in the lower parts of capital city, but in the slums area, but we're just gonna make it here where it's just ultra expensive and they get those rare goods. Because a lot of times, you know, like off-worlders who are like pirates, things of that sort, are going to come down here, because if they go at the upper parts of the capital city, they're gonna be told, how'd you get a hold of that? What are you doing here? This and that. If they make their way down to the shady underworld, then, you know, you're able to sell those rare things without getting told, like, how did you get it, or taxes or all that other kind of stuff. So that's why things like this are down here. Very rare treat. And that was kind of a simple thing. I ended up adding that back bench here just in case if I want to add things. But I just kind of really like that it's very shelved up, and you come to the front, you got that little front kind of stand or table, whatever the case is, where people just come. So I like that because you already have that on the one next to behind it. So it gives that vibe. You're just coming up to these vendors and, you know, doing your shopping. So I like that. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now, jumping into the next one here, to get just a general look from the overall first, and then we'll zoom in a little more. Now, as I mentioned, let me take the roof off. I'm sorry. Let me zoom out from this because it'll be easier for me to get more angles of it when I kind of move around. So this one, if you guys remember, just had that little table there, and it was going across like that way with like one stud width of a person to stand there, and then this table was there. But then when I saw that same rack on the lower store, I was like, like at first I was trying to figure out what I was gonna decorate in the store. This one's gonna always be like a kind of drinking bar, and I was like, I could put that shelf here and turn things around. It might look better. But the reason why is because when I started making these kind of little drinks, I didn't have any more cylinder pieces to make drinks. But I was like, I have these tops. So if I put them on those squares, they can be a different form of just a drink container. And, you know, with Lego, sometimes you got to use your imagination, especially when you don't have like advanced pieces or things of that sort. And so what happened was I was like, okay, I got 2 drinks on there. I was like, I could form more drinks, but I couldn't put a back shelf if this table is going like that. So I just had to twist things around and put that back shelf there. And I definitely think it adds to it. Yes, it gets a little bit in the way of the entrance, a little bit, but it ends up giving us that benefit of, you've got like that rack of a couple of drinks now. So it doesn't feel like it's that empty. In addition, this table was going sideways like that. I had to move it, but I definitely want to keep a table in there. Now, excuse me, it's not for sitting. People could stand around it, but I still think that it works. And in addition, if someone wants to have their drink hanging over the balcony part, they can. I think that's cool. Like I said, I mentioned in the previous video, I seen something like this in pictures of Coruscant's underground, where you'd have like this hanging over the ledge. So you'd have the ground level, and this would be like maybe just one story or one floor up higher than the ground level, and just an edge balcony with like a, a little, well, I'm having a brain fart right now, like a railing, and people would be able to look over the edge, or it'd be like a walking path all across that long thing. Now, I couldn't do a long walking path from this store to the next store, whatever the case is, but I could have, but now that I'm looking at it, I actually could do that, but I don't think I'm going to, but nonetheless though, it kind of simulates a little bit of that vibe where you're able to look over the edge, and obviously the steps take you upwards, but I like that I was able to squeeze in a lot more to that background. So now it feels like more of a filled out drink bar where, you got several different drinks. In the top shelf, you see the reason why the top ones have a different top on the bottle drink is because those are top shelf stuff. They're a lot more stronger. You got the little lamp there, so you can imagine this kind of yellowish, dim lit environment where people are just kind of drinking. Obviously, it's going to be dark outside because the lower levels of the capital city are always dark, because similar to Coruscant, and I'm not going to say that my design is like Coruscant in the fact that we have these kind of, the way they do it is more like a shelf. How a shelf is like above one level and then the other, and then that shelf base covers all things light coming to the bottom. That's how Coruscant is with its levels. This is more like really tall skyscrapers, at least the way I've designed my capital city, is more like really tall skyscrapers that you never have to go to the bottom because you have walkways and walk paths on the upper level, which is, if you look back at my capital city, the upper level build, I just called it capital city. I didn't label it a difference of the upper level or not. And in that one, I have this walking platform. So it's supposed to simulate the idea that you never have to come down below that level. That is the level of where the city starts. And so still, nonetheless, there wouldn't be a lot of light coming down from this, because you would imagine this is supposed to be a representation of buildings that go up for thousands of feet high. And so it's still going to be pretty dark. But yeah, so you have the kind of very dark lit neon lights going on, stuff like that. So I really like the way this came out. I like the changes that I made on it. I think it really brings it so much more to life. We're gonna push that right back in now, but let me first put this one on because this one aligns a little, that wasn't supposed to happen, a little differently, you see there. So sometimes I gotta make sure it aligns correctly, because when these edges are like that hanging off the edge, sometimes putting it back gets a little tricky. So we're gonna try to slide this in. Let me come from this way and it should fit a little bit better, I hope, because that little platform now is getting inside my way. The platform where the stairs were attached to. So here we go. This locks in from here. Sometimes when you take it off, you kind of miss where everything's supposed to go at in terms of its alignment, but there we go. So that falls into place there. Let's bring this a little closer into view. So yes, like I said, I really like the way that came out. At first I wasn't sure how it was going to come out, what I was going to add, but after I did, I really like the way that came out. And I know lately I've been doing a lot of these Lego videos, so sorry for you guys who are fans of watching some of the other content on the channel, but I'm just kind of in this space at the moment. And there we go. So like I said before, I really like this build. I think it came out really nice overall, and I think it definitely conveys that idea of the lower underground of the capital city. I think it looks nice. It's not easy to access everything, but nonetheless, it's easy to take things apart if you need to. And all the pieces that I use to lock things in, which is really just those over there, don't have to be locked in if I know I'm going to be moving things around a lot. And even those plates right there are easy to take off, as I already showed you before, or to put back. So that's not a big deal either. And the truth is, aside from accessing the interior of these things, this can always come up without even needing to take those pieces off. So that's good. So that is that, you guys. Next, in regards to this, the only thing I'm going to do, because I'm not going to do another build anytime soon, but I will just kind of lay out all three of the mocks and just kind of speak on them, and maybe even do like a little bit of a rant in regards to the initial idea that I had for where I created these things was kind of based on, and I always put those in the link in the description. I'm going to have it in here as well, where I was thinking about how Lego could redefine their Lego space genre of, you know, sets, and just kind of some loose ideas. And then that kind of inspired me to kind of start building my own kind of thing. So stay tuned for that, you guys. And as always, like, share, comment, subscribe. I'll catch you guys in the next video.